wasn't a summit, it was an ambush disguised as formality. The marble walls of the Geneva Conference Hall glimmered under soft light, yet the air was thick with tension as world leaders sat in a circular formation, their flags standing tall behind them like war banners masquerading as diplomacy, with cameras everywhere and microphones live, the world listening. At the center sat Senator J. Vance, sharp-suited, jaw-locked, eyes fixed like a hawk on one man, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, young, calm, unreadable, wearing no tie, no smile, only a military jacket and the weight of a continent on his shoulders. "This world has rules," Vance said, leaning forward, "and you, Captain Traoré, don't seem to understand them. There is order, here institutions, protocol, power." Traoré didn't blink, letting the silence stretch until Vance pressed harder. "You want to nationalize your resources, expel our companies, reject foreign oversight. You don't belong in this world order." The room shifted as some diplomats lowered their eyes, while others watched as though waiting for an explosion. And finally Traoré leaned forward and said, "Then I'll break it." The room froze. Even the translator hesitated, almost disbelieving the words as she repeated them in English, French, and Mandarin, yet the meaning was unmistakable. Vance gave a tight, forced laugh, the kind used to disguise offense before, asking, "Is that a threat?" To which Traoré replied evenly, "No. That's a diagnosis." From that moment everything changed, as what had been scheduled as a routine economic meeting became a battlefield of ideologies, where beneath polished speeches and polite nods, a raw confrontation unfolded, the old world clashing with the rising voice of the uninvited. While cameras zoomed in, the West saw a rebel, the oppressed saw a warrior, and the world saw a line drawn with one man daring to cross it. The applause that followed was polite, brief, and hollow, and once the cameras were off and the press ushered out, the real meetings began, the ones hidden from public view, in a dimly lit chamber 3 floors below the hall, where 5 Western leaders gathered, and J.D. Vance was already waiting, his tie loosened, his voice tighter than ever. "You all heard him," Vance said, pacing in front of the long mahogany table. He didn't blink. He didn't flinch. He told the entire world, on live cameras, that he's ready to shatter the very structure we built. The Canadian Prime Minister muttered, "Maybe he's bluffing." Vance spun around sharply. "Traoré doesn't bluff. He moves like a soldier but thinks like a revolutionary, and that's dangerous." Across the table, a European trade minister tossed down a folder. Inside were satellite images. A new port under construction in southern Burkina Faso by Chinese contractors. An oil pipeline being negotiated with Russia. French mining companies already expelled. American consultants deported. "He's replacing us," whispered the German envoy. Vance slammed his hand against the table. "No, he's replacing the order. And if that model succeeds, others will follow. Mali, Niger, maybe even nations we thought were allies." Silence followed, until the British Foreign Secretary leaned forward, clearing her throat. "So, what's the plan?" Vance didn't hesitate. "We box him in economically, diplomatically, psychologically. We make him look like a tyrant, isolate him, push him into a corner, and when he bites back he will," someone muttered. "We call it aggression, and we respond." There it was not yet a war plan, but the blueprint of a psychological siege. Meanwhile, across town, Traoré sat in a modest hotel room. No suite, no luxury, just a chair, a desk, and a dozen folders spread across it, each stamped with the seal of a different nation. He wasn't resting. He was studying the rules, so he could break them with precision. Standing before a mirror, not out of vanity, but calculation, he adjusted his deep forest green jacket. It bore no medals, only a small embroidered emblem of Burkina Faso. Every detail of his appearance was deliberate, clean, disciplined, unmistakably African. He didn't dress to impress them. He dressed to remind them. And across the city, J.D. Vance was already on air, with a major American network. The host smiled with polished teeth, but the questions had fangs. Senator Vance, you shared a stage with Ibrahim Traoré yesterday. Some are calling it one of the most defiant speeches ever made against the Western-led world order. What's your response? Vance folded his hands, his tone measured. My response is simple. Traoré misunderstands how power works. You don't just walk into a room and declare yourself an equal. You earn that place. You align. You compromise. He refuses to do either, the host pressed. Or perhaps he believes you've compromised too much. Vance chuckled tightly. No, he just wants to tear the whole table down. That's not leadership, that's chaos. Back in his hotel room, Traoré switched off the TV and walked to the window, watching the city below. From this height, Washington looked orderly, powerful, like a fortress of reason, but he knew better. Control, he'd learned in the military, was an illusion. The tighter you tried to grip it, the faster it slipped through your fingers. His aide, a former intelligence officer named Dio, entered with a tablet. They've already started the smear campaign, Dio said, scrolling. Headlines, Traoré's hidden ties to China. Is Burkina Faso sliding into dictatorship? Even a fabricated story about private villas and offshore accounts. Traoré barely glanced at it. They'll overplay their hand. They always do. Dio hesitated. You still plan to debate Vance on CNN next week? Traoré turned, his eyes steady and sharp. I'm not here to make friends. I'm here to make fractures. And fractures would come, for the debate stage would not be a platform, but a battlefield. The studio lights blazed like searchlights. The set gleamed in red, white, and blue, CNN's flagship stage designed to impress. But Traoré wasn't looking for lights or approval. He was calculating angles, exits, expressions, his soldier's instincts, as sharp as ever. Across from him, J.D. Vance adjusted his cufflinks. The senator, having traded his down-home rhetoric for sharp tailoring and a polished tone, knowing this wasn't just a debate, it was global theater. The moderator cleared her throat. Welcome to the Global Future Forum. Tonight, we bring together Senator J.D. Vance and President Ibrahim Traoré to discuss sovereignty, global power, and the future of the world order. The tension was already thick as the moderator continued. We'll begin with you, Senator Vance. Do you believe President Traoré's push for a new multipolar world is dangerous? Dangerous? Vance repeated, leaning forward. I think it's reckless. The current order, for all its flaws, has prevented large-scale war, enabled progress, and supported global trade. You don't just smash it because you're impatient. Then he turned toward Traoré. You want to talk revolution, Mr. President? That's easy when someone else cleaned up the last mess. A low murmur rippled through the audience, but Traoré didn't blink. He leaned into the microphone. Senator, he said calmly, your world order exists because others bled for it. You speak of progress, but whose? The minerals under our soil built your phones. The debts you enforced chain our schools. Your wars created our orphans. He paused, his gaze locked on Vance. I'm not here to smash your system. I'm here to show it was never built for us in the first place. The audience fell silent. Vance scoffed, trying to regain ground. You sound like you're preaching. But leadership is not rage, it's responsibility. No, Traoré shot back, his voice sharp. You mean compliance? Responsibility is making sure my people don't die thirsty, while your corporations pump oil from beneath their feet. The moderator, visibly flustered, stepped in. Gentlemen, let's keep this civil. It is civil, Traoré replied. This is what diplomacy looks like when it's honest. Cameras captured every word, and within minutes, social media erupted. This wasn't a debate, it was a reckoning. Vance leaned forward with a subtle smirk, recalling the past 48 Hours he had spent combing through intelligence briefings, op-eds, and strategy notes. His staff had armed him with what they believed was a weapon. Leaked reports suggesting Chinese backing in one of Burkina Faso's recent infrastructure deals. Vance seized the moment, his voice smooth, directed not just at Traoré, but at the world watching. "I want transparency," he said. "The American people deserve to know how much of your independence is funded by Beijing." He smiled faintly, like a hunter who had finally cornered his prey, but Traoré didn't he flinch. "Thank you, Senator," he said slowly, almost amused. "You've just made my point better than I ever could." Vance raised an eyebrow. "You believe that because China offers a loan, or builds a road, I belong to them. But when your country spent hundreds of years taking our gold, oil, and uranium, we were still called independent." "Curious math," the audience murmured, shifting in their seats. Traoré turned to the moderator. "May I show something?" She hesitated, then nodded. From his inside pocket, he pulled a single sheet of paper, typed, dated, and stamped. "These are American companies operating in Africa today, extracting over $40 billion in raw materials every year. Not loans, not aid, extraction." He tapped the corner of the page. "The amount returned to African nations in profit sharing, less than 5%. So, Senator, if money equals control, perhaps you should ask whose leash we're really on." The room changed. The audience wasn't just listening anymore, they were leaning in. Vance tried to pivot. "You still haven't answered the question." "I did," Traoré cut in. "But here's one for you. If my deal with China builds 10 hospitals, and your deal extracts $10 billion, who's really buying power?" The moderator quickly intervened, aware that the live broadcast was streaming across 4 continents. On social media, trending hashtags had already collapsed into a single name: Traoré. The senator realized too late that what he thought was a trap had become a stage, and the man he tried to corner now stood tall at its center. After the heated exchange, the studio fell eerily silent. The moderator shuffled her notes, unsure how to continue, and even the cameras seemed to pause as if the tension itself needed a moment to breathe. Traoré said nothing more, but his words hung in the air like smoke. Vance, visibly unsettled, tried to reclaim control. "Look, I respect your passion, Captain. Sorry, President Traoré, but passion doesn't build systems. It doesn't keep order. It doesn't." Traoré raised his hand, a small but commanding gesture, the kind that silences a room. And the room did fall silent. "You speak of order," he said, his voice calm but cutting. "But your order is built on the silence of others. For decades, we have been silent. We let the mines be stripped, the oil siphoned, the children starve while foreign aid lectures us on morality." His eyes locked onto Vance. "I am not here to stay silent anymore." The moderator cut in. "President Traoré, what exactly do you want from this new system you speak of?" "Not charity, not lectures, just respect," Traoré replied. "The right to sit at the table without being told to be grateful for crumbs. The right to own the future we build." The audience erupted in applause, not the polite clapping of diplomats, but something raw, genuine. Vance leaned back, his jaw tightening. "Respect is earned, Mr. President, and yet you demand it without earning ours. And yet you demand mine while denying my people theirs," Traoré shot back, the words cutting like steel. For a moment, Vance was speechless. His usual arsenal, smirks, deflections, clever pivots, seemed useless against a man speaking with unshakable conviction. The moderator tried to move forward. "Let's shift to economic development." But the viewers at home weren't listening anymore. Social media had already chosen its victor. Clips of Traoré's raised hand, his unblinking stare, his declaration, "I am not here to stay silent anymore," were going viral. This wasn't just a debate, it was a moment, a turning point. The next morning, headlines across the globe carried one name: Traoré, the African who shook the system, read an American outlet. World order questioned in viral clash, said another. Even traditionally skeptical European media admitted Traoré disarms with truth. But inside Capitol Hill, the aftermath was anything but celebratory. J.D. Vance sat across from 3 senior aides, his face tense, voice clipped. "He humiliated me," he said bluntly. On live television, one aide shifted uneasily. "Senator, with respect, you underestimated him. You thought he was a tribal nationalist. He turned out to be a strategist and a rhetorician." Vance stood, pacing. "This can't go unanswered. We need to remind people who sets the terms of global leadership." Meanwhile, in Ouagadougou, Traoré was reviewing footage of the debate with his security advisor. His expression wasn't triumphant. "They'll come harder now," he said. "Not with words, with policy, sanctions, pressure offers. We can't afford to accept." "What's the plan?" his advisor asked. "We don't wait, we lead," Traoré replied. "They built a world order on obedience. We'll build one on ownership." Days later, he announced an emergency economic summit with leaders from Latin America, Southeast Asia, and Eastern Europe, pointedly excluding the United States. The message was unmistakable. The future wasn't being negotiated, it was being reclaimed. In Washington, Vance exploded when he saw the announcement. "He's building a counterblock," one aide muttered. "No," Vance growled. "He's building a rebellion." But to Traoré, it wasn't rebellion, it was balance, a recalibration of power, long overdue. At a press conference, when asked whether he feared Western retaliation, Traoré smiled. Faintly. "I don't fear storms," he said. "I build shelters." Within hours, the quote circled the globe. This wasn't just politics anymore. It was personal, ideological, and irreversible. 2 weeks later, the summit opened not in Paris or Washington, but in Lome, Togo. Cameras flashed as leaders from more than 20 nations arrived, each greeted personally by Ibrahim Traoré. No suits, no teleprompters, just firm handshakes and firmer resolve. His opening speech electrified the room. "For decades, we were told who we are, where we fit, and how high we could reach," he declared. "But we're done living inside someone else's blueprint." He paused, his gaze steady, his words deliberate. "If the world order cannot include us with dignity, then it is not an order. It is a cage, and we are here to break it." The applause was thunderous, shaking the walls. Across the Atlantic, J.D. Vance was preparing what he called a correction. In a televised Senate hearing, he unveiled the Global Compliance Initiative, a package of economic restrictions aimed at punishing nations collaborating with so-called destabilizing actors. Burkina Faso was at the top of the list. But the backlash was immediate. American college students staged walkouts, denouncing neo-colonialism. Social media flooded with clips of Traoré's speech. And once again, the world was forced to choose a side. A viral hashtag erupted, #WeChoose, spreading across continents and unsettling even Washington, where some lawmakers hesitated. Senator Booker remarked, "Vance isn't confronting chaos. He's resisting change." At the summit's close, Traoré faced the media with calm defiance. "The ones who wrote history never imagined we'd hold the pen. Now we do, and we're not writing sequels, we're writing something new." Moments later, he unveiled the Lome Accord, a pact binding the attending nations in shared infrastructure investment, digital independence goals, and collective resource strategies. It was more than policy, it was provocation. In his office, Vance seethed. "He's hijacked the narrative," an aide muttered. "No," Vance corrected coldly. "He's hijacked the audience." But he still held one weapon, the stage of global legitimacy, and he intended to use it. 1 month later, all eyes turned to Geneva for the Global Leadership Forum, an annual gathering of the world's power brokers. Vance, fresh from a media blitz painting Traoré as a puppet of anti-Western chaos, secured a prime debate slot, so had Ibrahim Traoré. The hall gleamed with glass walls, translation booths, and velvet chairs, but it was the stage that burned. Vance spoke first, polished and deliberate, his voice rising like a sermon. We cannot let emotional revolutionaries undermine centuries of institutional wisdom. The world works because we have rules, and rules require order. Polite applause followed, thin and obligatory. Then Traoré walked out, no script, no fear, only purpose. He locked eyes with Vance, then scanned the audience, then the flags towering behind them all. You speak of rules, he began, his tone low but piercing. But who wrote them? You speak of order, but who gets to stand, and who is told to kneel in that order? He paced slowly, every step intentional. For years, the world's podiums have echoed with lectures. Africa must learn, Africa must follow, Africa must behave. And now you are terrified because Africa speaks. A heavy silence descended. Vance leaned forward, forcing a smirk, but the room was no longer his. You're romanticizing rebellion. That's not leadership, Vance scoffed. No, Traoré replied, his voice steady. I'm revealing your illusion. Leadership isn't preserving a table you built. It's having the courage to flip it when it's rotten. Gasps rippled through the hall, cameras snapped, and the moderator froze as Vance's face twitched. Traoré pressed on, not with anger, but with crystalline clarity. I do not reject order. I reject hypocrisy. I reject empires masquerading as teachers. I reject those who sell security while breeding instability. This time the applause was thunderous, sustained, global. Vance looked shaken. He hadn't expected applause, and he hadn't expected truth to hit harder than rhetoric. Backstage, a BBC reporter whispered into her mic. This wasn't just a debate. This was a shift in gravity. The old world had a microphone, but the new world had the room. The forum ended, but the echo did not. Clips of the exchange flooded every platform. Traoré dismantles Western narrative in 7 minutes. Read one headline. Another declared, the day the global South spoke back. In Washington, Vance scrambled for damage control. Traoré's comments were emotional, not strategic. He told a morning show only for the host to cut back. Senator, emotions don't get standing ovations in Geneva. Truth does. Across Paris, Berlin, and London, foreign policy circles scrambled as new reports warned of a widening leadership vacuum the West could no longer fill alone. And in Ouagadougou, the streets erupted in celebration. Yet Traoré did not tweet, did not issue statements. He simply worked. He invited nations to Burkina Faso for the first sovereignty forum, a gathering of states tired of old hierarchies. He froze all new mining contracts pending a full audit to expose rigged deals, and announced a sweeping legal challenge against exploitative colonial-era agreements still in force. Behind closed doors, allies whispered, he's just one man, he can't win this fight. But the youth saw it differently. He's not fighting alone. He's giving us the fight. In the U.S., during a press event, a young reporter asked Vance, Senator, what would you say to Traoré now? Vance hesitated, eyes dropping for the first time. I'd say the world's changing faster than we planned for. The camera didn't blink, and neither did the audience. Meanwhile, in Burkina Faso, Traoré stood atop the roof of a newly built school in the eastern province. Children at his side held books, not flags, and behind him the hills stretched wide and unbroken. A general leaned toward him and said, the world expected you to fall after that poison. Instead, you stood taller. Traoré smiled softly. That's the thing about their rules. They only work if we believe them. He paused, gaze fixed on the horizon. And we stopped believing. They had told him he didn't belong. He proved the room was too small. They said the world, order was fixed. He didn't just question it. He cracked it open. Traoré never asked to lead a revolution, but when history called, he answered without hesitation. He wasn't there to make noise. He was there to make space for the silenced, the dismissed, the underestimated. And when the curtain finally fell, he wasn't waiting for applause. He was waiting for impact. Because some men follow the rules, others rewrite them.